Cimoooooooo! What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you an updated meta-analysis for the November 2019 format. We had two events conclude this past weekend, Pro Play Tour Dallas as well as YCS Pasadena, and both of the results from these events are going to influence future events such as YCS Milan, which is taking place this upcoming weekend at the time of recording, as well as smaller tournaments such as local regionals and the like. So I want to make sure you guys are up to date on the latest trends, so that way you know which direction the meta is going. And I do want to say that we did have an awesome turnout at Pro Play Tour Dallas, so big shout out to all of you guys for coming. We have Pro Play Tour Las Vegas as our next and actually final stop before the Invitational. So if you are on the West Coast, you definitely better turn up. $2,000 in cash is up for grabs. Your invite gets you into the $10,000 Invitational taking place in January in Orlando, Florida. And I'll of course be there doing live stream commentary coverage for the event as well. So links are in the description if you want to pre-register, and I hope to see you guys there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. I want to start off with the results of Pro Play Tour Dallas, obviously because it was the smaller event of the two, and here is going to be your top 16 breakdown from that event. So our event had 241 players, and again, big shout outs to all of you guys who attended as well as watched the event on live stream. I think we had like 1,000 plus people consistently throughout the entire stream. We had way more than that on day two when the day two top 16 breakdown was going on, and man, it was just an absolute blast. But here's your breakdown. Again, these results aren't really too surprising. Our meta has been fairly consistent with like the top 5 decks and the like, but what's interesting about this metagame is that even though there are decks that are clearly better than others, it's been like a tier 2 rogue player's paradise because there have been so many decks that have been coming out of the woodwork and actually having a vying chance at making at a top cut slot, and this is no exception. And keep in mind, yes, while YCS Pasadena was taking place at the same time of this event, there were still some very significant names attending Pro Play Tour Dallas. We had Cameron Neal, Jesse Flores, Aaron McGinnis, very popular names that you might know, and frankly, that's, you know, some pretty stiff competition still having to fight for this top 16 and that cash money prize. But obviously Orcust is still going to be the best deck. Orcust did end up taking the event. There were 6 Orcusts in the top 16. A couple of them had to play each other and knocked each other out, but at the end there was an Orcust mirror match and only one could stand, and it happened to be Brandon. Now, here's Brandon's list for you guys to go ahead and look at, and honestly, this is a pretty cool list simply due to the fact that he's incorporating a card like Mask Change 2. Now, some of you guys might remember back in the day when we had Dark Law Burning Abyss, as we called it, when Burning Abyss was first released in tandem with the Warrior Strike structure deck, I believe, and people were playing Burning Abyss with Dark Law simply due to the fact that because we were in a graveyard reliant meta with decks like Shadal, Burning Abyss, and Satellar Knight at the time, basically if you have a Dark Law on the field, it's pretty difficult for your opponent to play out of the graveyard since it's a one-sided macrocosmos, not to mention you're able to rip cards out of your opponent's hand. So the same theory applies here, but what's cool about this as well is that if you normal something like, say, Armageddon Knight, and if your opponent were to use something like Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler, you can actually chain the Mask Change 2, tribute off the Armageddon Knight, you get your Dark Law, you can pitch a card like Heart Pourer out of your hand, or any of your other Orcust cards, and then your opponent pretty much blanks their entire hand trap, you get to pretty much get full value off of it, and you also have a Dark Law for your trouble. So that seems really, really powerful, and it's honestly no surprise that he ended up taking the entire event. One other thing I should mention is that a card like DD Crow is actually starting to see a lot of side deck, if not in this case main deck play, simply due to the graveyard reliance of decks like Orcust, like Salamangreat. It's even not bad against Striker and some other decks as well, and DD Crow just being able to remove the threat instantly. It's also not a once per turn, so if you draw it in multiples, it's not the worst. It's also dark, so if you're playing like Allure of Darkness, you've got synergy there. It's just an all-around very solid hand trap, and people are kind of leaning on it because it's one of the most effective hand traps against the meta. People are kind of not really feeling that the rest of the hand trap lineup is doing enough, whereas DD Crow is one of those, you know, end my turn type of hand traps to a degree, depending on what else the opponent may have as an extender. But just keep in mind that DD Crow is starting to see a lot more play, and it's something you might run into coming up at any future events. For the rest of the top 16 though, there was Salamangreat, there was Striker, there was Altergeist, decks you'd come to expect. There was a Magical Musketeer deck, not one but two actually, that made top 16, but one of them ended up getting top 4 as a matter of fact. Here's the list for the top 16 player, but I'm gonna go ahead and have the top 4 list available for you in a deck profile, so you guys can look at that and see the differences between the two builds. I was kind of hoping they'd have a mirror match because I thought that'd be really cool to have on stream, but unfortunately that didn't end up happening, and the top 16 player ended up losing in top 16. But Magical Musketeer is really interesting due to the fact that it's this rogue style deck that's actually been able to consistently do well in this format because of the fact that you've got a card like Cross Dominator, which can negate the effect of a monster and put its attack to 0, and then because you can just make something like Utopia Double very easily in this deck with like a single Starfire and an activation, then you can just go ahead, make Utopia Double, hit your opponent for a 10k Utopia, and just win the game flat out from there, and play a ton of other go second cards. You know, it's a pretty viable strategy now simply due to the fact that it's had consistent results up to this point, or at least semi-consistent for that matter, but ultimately Magical Musketeer is a deck you might want to look into just to understand how the deck functions in case you happen to come across it. A couple of other decks I wanted to mention, and these were the stars of the weekend, was a top 8 Gladiator Beast. Yes, Gladiator Beast. I don't know what year it is, but Gladiator Beast managed to make top 8, and the reason it made top 8 was because it went up against another rogue deck being Madolche. Now, Madolche is a deck that a lot of people have actually been kind of messing around with because Mageline is actually a 1-card OTK. It's able to actually assemble a pretty insane board turn 1, and going second, it's been filling this niche as a very interesting go second strategy simply due to that 1-card OTK, and again, being able to pile on all the different going second cards to help just break your opponent's board. You've got Queen Tiramisu to be able to shuffle away multiple of your opponent's cards and go in for an OTK. I mean, this isn't the first time this deck has topped. This deck has won, or excuse me, not won regionals, but topped multiple regionals. So at the regional level, this is a deck that might catch on a little bit more. I wouldn't expect to maybe see it something like a YCS, but there are people crazy enough to try it, so bear that in mind. However, I want to go ahead and get back to Glad Beast because, man, Gladiator Beast in 2019, this is so cool. Remember, the deck actually did receive a lot of support in Chaos Impact, and some of these cards are rather interesting. A lot of people have been trying out the deck in the form of a go first, build my board type of strategy, and to basically make it so that your opponent has to out you for them to win, otherwise they just have to scoop it up. But Yobani actually played a strategy of going second and breaking the opponent's board, playing cards like Utopia Double, again to OTK the opponent. So it's interesting to see the variety of go second OTK decks that are emerging to combat the current metagame, because a lot of the top strategies actually leave a monster such as Galatea or Sunlight Wolf, or just this weak Link monster that has to forcibly be in attack mode, and that way they can just hit over it with a lightning and be perfectly clear to win games. So again, both these deck lists are going to be on my channel with the profile, so be sure to check those out. They were an absolute treat. It was unfortunate they both had to play each other in for a feature match, but man, that was one hell of a feature match to watch. But now we're going to move on to YCS Pasadena, and here is the top 32 breakdown for that event. You might notice this is a little bit identical to the top 16 of Pro Play Tour Dallas, simply due to the fact that Orcust is taking up about half the representation. Salamangreat is also up there, Striker's in there as well, Thunder's also making an appearance. There's a couple of other off decks in there, but again, Orcust is just easily asserting its dominance as the strongest deck of the format, just due to the fact that it's so powerful, and even with a deck that has been as well known as this for as long as it has, people are still innovating the deck, and Kobe Short was the one who managed to take first place at YCS Pasadena with Sky Striker Orcust. Now, there were some videos out on YouTube of this deck kind of conceptually running around, so this isn't the first time a deck like this has popped up, but I think it's the first time it's gotten this much notoriety, and this is kind of paying homage back to like the Trickstar Sky Striker days, because you're just playing a package of like 3 Engage, 1 Widow Anchor, 1 Drones, and then, you know, a one-of card, in this case being like Shark Cannon. Back in the day it used to be Afterburner, but Shark Cannon is much better in this format since it's so graveyard reliant, and it's pretty much an extender in some instances as well. And then you're just playing it with a very solid deck like Orcust to give you additional draw power, to give you ways to out specific boards, to give you more layers of interruption. The deck seems fairly solid. Cameron Neal at Pro Play Tour Dallas was actually piloting this very same deck. Some players are actually playing Into the Void just to give them more spells in Grave to be able to trigger Engage a lot quicker, but Kobe decided not to opt for that route. It's just a very interesting innovation in the format, and something we haven't exactly seen before, but after this weekend, especially since a lot of the top players were playing this specific build, I definitely think this is going to catch on and might be the deck to beat going into YCS Milan. We'll just have to see, but man, this is going to be very interesting moving forward. Now, coming in second place was Cody Angeloff's Draco Sky Striker deck. Now, I'll be honest, I thought this deck was completely unplayable after Widow Anchor went to 1, but clearly I was wrong considering this got second place. The interesting theory behind this is that because we're in a format playing relatively control-ish, but also also a lot of combo. The Draco cards are very good at combating the control decks because you have all the true Draco cards to just pop all the cards, and then you've got the Sky Striker cards to kind of handle the combo decks and keep them in check. So it's this interesting hybrid that, you know, a lot of players like Johnny Lee and Noah Bangelman have been experimenting with, and now some other players are getting on the strategy as well. And honestly, again, here it is taking second place at this event, so clearly it must have done well for him. I'm not sure if more people are going to jump on this bandwagon either, but we'll just have to see. This could be another deck and innovation moving forward into this November format. Then for third place, we had Walter Jewell playing Salamangreat. Walter has managed to top multiple events with this deck. It's a pretty cookie cutter list, but honestly, this just kind of proves that Salamangreat is still a very powerful deck and definitely cannot be disrespected. It is a deck that is just able to kind of handle the entire metagame all on its own, and it's a pretty consistent deck for the most part. You get to play pretty much every game of Yu-Gi-Oh! While you're playing this deck, so that can feel pretty good, and ultimately, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that this is seeing one of the highest representation levels across all events. And then two one-off decks that I want to go ahead and shout out real quick are Blair Hunter playing Cyber Dragon Orcust still. Even though we no longer have Mermaid, he's able to rely on cards such as Cyber Dragon Nashter to be able to go ahead and discard your Orcust cards, so that way you can Orcust combo in addition to having your Cyber Dragon cards, but also playing 3 full copies of Orchestrated Return to again just help fuel the graveyard, draw into cards that you need, and that way you can get your Orcust cards in the graveyard to back up your Cyber Dragon plays. The Cyber Dragon is just so very powerful going second and breaking boards, and then having that Orcust combo to solidify that shouldn't really come as a surprise. This deck kind of went away once Mermaid got banned, but it looks like Blair is still piloting it, so congrats to him. And then we also had Jared Randolph and True King Dinosaur. I believe Jared actually top 16 a Pro Play Tour event in Philadelphia, if my memory serves correctly. And again, True King Dinosaur, this is a deck that a lot of Rogue players love to death, and every time it tops, people get really excited. Just an interesting deck to look into, and you know, congrats to him, because honestly, I don't think anyone would have expected True King Dinosaur to make top 32 at a YCS, at least in this particular format. So guys, that's gonna go ahead and wrap it up for this meta analysis. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.